Hello and welcome to another episode of All Elite Arcade, your home for video game discussions here at AEW Games. As always, I'm Evil Uno here with my friend, the Chugs. How you doing, Chugs?
Uno, I'm doing great. It's been a great week for gaming. How are you doing, man?
I'm doing incredible, honestly. I played a lot of video games this week, which is a good thing. It's a rarity in our lives nowadays. But seriously. I'm back on the train. I've been playing a whole lot of stuff. You've been playing a whole lot of stuff. It's my favorite week of the year. It's Halloween week. I am preemptively loading a bunch of horror games to play in the next couple weeks, in the next week, as well as I think I've watched 15 horror movies this month, and I'm planning on watching more this week. I've got some haunted houses in the works. But anyways, all to say, it's a good week for Evil No. I'm doing okay. You're back to Twitch streaming. You're back to your 5-game cycle as well.
I am, yeah. So after my long journey with Black Myth Wukong, I finally was able to jump back into this 5-game cycle that I've been excited about too. But very quickly, going off of what you were saying for Halloween, I am so excited for this week too, because this week I'm finally going to get my hands on Silent Hill 2 Remake. I've been waiting on purpose for right around Halloween to be able to check it out and play it. And as you know, my recent love or overall love for the RE remake games and seeing what they've done with Silent Hill 2 Remake. I know they're two very different things, but I'm very excited to jump into that. And also very excited to watch some more horror movies. I just watched a good one last night. But in regards to the 5-game cycle, again, I have jumped back into The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt, which I've said this before and I will continue to say it. I really do think objectively that or Elden Ring are the greatest video games ever made. They have two of the best DLCs ever reviewed. They're just absolutely incredible games. The Witcher 3 was the first game that I ever played where I was like, ooh, okay, it's certainly one of my favorites, but I really do think top to bottom, this is the greatest video game ever made. I love it so much. And I was thinking recently, especially after jumping in and playing it again, why the game is so special. Of course, the environments are amazing. The characters have so much depth and are voice acted incredibly well. Just really, really awesome characters. But I think the biggest thing for me about The Witcher 3 is its side content. So yesterday, when I was streaming The Witcher 3, all I did was side content for about 3 hours. And I honest to God, I think you could play 30% of the game to just play through the main story. Like a vast majority of the game is side content with different monsters and different characters, different circumstances you're thrown into. But why the side quests are so good to me is the moral dilemma that you find yourself in when you're making these decisions. First of all, your decisions absolutely strongly impact the way that the game goes, both in the side content and the main missions. But the interesting thing is how these side quests unfold. Like I did a mission yesterday where I had to go, and again, slight spoilers for side missions in The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt.
Which at this point, just so I'm clear, I've never played it, but like I'm completely okay. No. I'm completely okay hearing this. This game's been out for a decade, so.
It has, and Uno, there are so many different side quests.
Yeah, I heard you can play 100+ hours and miss 100 hours of side quests.
Easily. I put 150 hours in and beat the game and the DLCs, but had so many side quests left over. Mm-hmm. And I love side quests. But Uno, you 100% should play The Witcher 3, dude. It's so good. But anyway, so I'm there. I'm in some new town that I discovered because you're constantly discovering new things. The map is huge. And they have these things called notice boards that randomly will pop up. And you can see within that local town if there's any missions or anything that anyone would like you to take care of to give you some crowns or gold or money. And I went to this one notice board, this new town. I was just riding around on Roach, my horse, and I picked up this pamphlet, and it said, "Hey, there's an issue at the town down the road. Can you please go check it out?" And then you end up going down, and you see that everyone in this town has been slaughtered, like everyone. And you use your Witcher senses to kind of figure out and discover what happened here. Because at first you think it's some sort of monster. That's what a lot of the townspeople thought. But then Geralt gets there and sees no, these are sword wounds. Like this is definitely not from some sort of monster. Then this little girl runs by. She was hiding in a barn. You go and talk to her and you're like, oh my God, what happened? But she's screaming and saying, no, you look just like him. So then Geralt has to interrogate this little girl and discovers, oh my God, it was another Witcher that did this. So then you use your senses to go and find this other Witcher who's kind of hiding out, but he's injured. And of course you can go right into a fight and say, hey, you slaughtered a whole town, you're done. But I love to hear all the juicy lore. Give me all the juicy lore for these side quests. And as you interrogate him, he says, hey, so this, first of all, that is not what happened. I didn't just show up and just slaughter this town. I was supposed to be paid X amount of crowns, and they offered me significantly less. And I said there was going to be a problem if they didn't pay up. Then they took me into this barn to say, like, oh yeah, we have the gold over here. And they tried to kill me. So then you hear that part, and you in your brain can go, okay, I can understand why the people within the barn were attacked and killed if he really was being attempted to be murdered or whatever. But then as you dig further, you realize there was no reason for him to slaughter the entire town. He lost his temper. Also, he's done this before, which you discover from prying into other missions. So I ended up ending The Witcher. I ended up taking him out. But again, you don't have to do that. You can let him leave. You can let him walk away. Also, another side note too, but a few other quests that I did is there are so many different types of monsters, but not just types of monsters, like types of those specific monsters too. Like there's like over 10 different vampires that you can encounter, and they all have different traits or different things that they like. Like some of them dwell in caves. Others live in cities. Others specifically like the blood of humans that is soaked in alcohol. So on purpose, this vampire waits like outside of a bar to like lead someone to be
drunk. Yeah.
For people to be drunk because he thinks the blood tastes sweeter with alcohol in the blood. Like there's so many different things within this game. And what I love so much is, again, I put 150 hours into this game years ago and played through it. But as I'm playing through it again, there are so many side quests that I forgot about. Like as much as I love this game, it's so massive that it does feel like a new experience all over again.
Do you feel like nowadays they've also updated it to like so it runs better? They updated the UI supposedly. Yep. Like as far as graphically, it's not like they can remaster it, but like they've really like whatever rough edges had a decade ago. Now you have the perfect version of that game. Do you see like a clear difference? Because I haven't played it. I've tried to jump into it, and in a lot of ways it feels like a game from 10 years ago, but it's so big and so revered. Like the amount of people that love Witcher 3, I have friends who like live and die by that game and don't play a whole lot of other stuff, but they like are super into the Witcher lore. They watch the TV show. They went out of their way to try and play the previous games, which were not popular at the time. So like, do you feel it's nowadays is still good to jump into that game? Like, do you think it's still worth investing my time to play it?
I think 100%, especially now, because like you had mentioned, I'm so glad you brought this up. When I originally played it, I played it on the Xbox One. Mm-hmm. And I had played it after it had been out for a little bit. Apparently, when The Witcher 3 launched, there were quite a bit of problems.
Yeah.
But then as time went on and they patched it and the DLC and all that stuff, it ran fine. But again, I'm now playing on Xbox Series X, the complete edition, the next-gen update, and oh my God, the load times are unbelievable. The frame rate is a smooth 60 the entire time. And again, there's no glitching whatsoever. Like, it runs incredibly well. And again, there are some things that over time I think have been improved upon. Like, I'm so excited for the next Witcher games or the next Witcher trilogy because, again, for some people, the combat can feel a little bit clunky. They're not like crazy about that aspect, or sometimes people have an issue with the exploration on Roach and things like that. But again, to me, it's something you very quickly get used to. But you love the setting and the characters and the story so much that none of it matters. And part of the combat and the little bit of clunkiness to it kind of adds to the intensity of the fights in a lot of ways. And there's just so many different things that you can do within the game. But I think absolutely, with this next gen update, it runs great, it plays great, and the story is one of the greatest ever told. It's so good.
So truthfully, like a lot of people have tried to tell me to play it, and a lot of times I've played that first hour, and I feel like every first hour of video game is hard to get into because it's a lot of introductory stuff. It's setting up the lore, but everyone would always tell me about the side stories and about how like the story beats are incredible. You meet a character, and within that 3-hour like mini story you get with them, you have like all sets of emotions. But one thing I hadn't known until very now is that there is actually branching paths to some of these side missions. You can actually make decisions and stuff. I had always considered it like kind of like GTA, where you play, but there's only one way to do it, right? And because it's a game from a decade ago, I just assumed it didn't have this kind of like good path, bad path. And I guess that's the moral conundrum of The Witcher in general, right? You're a mercenary for hire, so are you a good guy? Are you a bad guy? But I didn't realize that like that's actually in like, as you delve into the side stories, that's a main proponent of it. So yeah, I'm definitely going to play it. I think this conversation might have finally tipped the boat. I think I'm gonna have to do it.
I hope so, man. And I do want to say as well, because I think I've told you this before, and maybe I've mentioned this on this podcast, but the first time I tried to play The Witcher, I put it down. I was like, I don't know if I'm really in the mood for this. And then I ended up picking it up again later on. I think I jumped to like Dark Souls 3 and then ended up going back to The Witcher 3 and being like, no, I keep hearing how amazing this game is. I'm going to stick with it. And somewhere early on in the game, it was like my brain, it just clicked.
Yeah.
Where I was like, oh, I'm obsessed with this game now. I love it so much. It was fairly early on. But the branching paths are amazing. Not only with Geralt either being a good guy or a bad guy, there's different romantic relationships that you can approach. So many different things. But it really is a once-in-a-lifetime, one-of-a-kind video game that I think in many ways has inspired a lot of open world games since then, especially regarding their side content.
Other than that, so I know you're back on the streaming wagon. Have you touched any other games in the last week?
So I did, fortunately, Uno, actually just last night. I thankfully was able to jump into trying out Call of Duty Black Ops 6.
Hey, it came out last Friday.
It did.
This is probably the largest release for Xbox. I mean, it is across all platforms, I believe.
Yes.
But it is on Game Pass. It is owned by Microsoft nowadays. I believe they own Activision now or playing. But I've always wanted to jump into the campaign because they have a lot of like, usually they're short, but they have so many interesting bells and whistles that they use for first-person shooter. And supposedly the whole bag of tricks is in this game. So I'm very excited to jump into that for sure. I'm definitely like, I have Game Pass. Part of my week is I'm going to dabble in that campaign mode for sure.
Also, I do want to mention quickly with zombies, since we are getting closer to Halloween.
Yeah.
I love the zombies mode so much, and they actually brought back the traditional round system for zombies, which is awesome. I know one of the previous entries, they had like this open world zombies map, which again, very, very cool concept, but I actually love the traditional sense and the round system within like the original concept of zombies. I think it's super, super fun. But in regards to the multiplayer, again, with, of course, lots of awesome guns, lots of really, really awesome maps. But my favorite thing for sure is this Omni movement system, Uno. Like,
oh yeah, so, you can strafe in directions now, right?
Yes, you can sprint in any direction. And because I remember the second I played it, that's what I wanted to see right away. It feels so awesome to be able to sprint in 8 different directions. I think it feels so smooth and feels so cool that this is going to be a thing that many more first-person shooters end up using in their games, because it feels so crispy.
Yeah, I know. A lot of like so the pre-reviews were saying that this is like the game changer for first-person shooters. Like a lot of times, Call of Duty will do something small, and you'll see like its impact on other games that are first-person shooter in the next 2 years, and like them committing to what is like, I guess like strafing and side running. Doom has sort of that, but it has like a different type of mechanic to it. You know, there's no cover fire. It's very much like laying as many bullets into an enemy as possible. This one, like, you're gonna see some high-level plays now that I'm really curious to see, because one thing I do like about Call of Duty is every year it comes out, and every year I start watching these compilations of like these craziest kills. People sniping people across the map, headshotting through 3 people and stuff.
360 no scopes, baby.
Yeah, exactly. And so I'm really excited for this because the people that on reviews alone, if you've played it and you're saying that it's incredible, but like,
yeah,
you're probably going to see this running mechanic in all future FPSs for the next like 4 years.
Yes, I completely agree. And like you said, they will come up with some sort of innovation or some sort of idea. And because Call of Duty is so popular, you're right. I think so many different devs are going to end up going this route. But again, like you had mentioned as well, and like I had mentioned earlier, I can't wait to play the campaign, especially considering I know their previous campaign or the one before that was not received very well.
No,
so
that is true.
I love the idea that Call of Duty has said, oh, okay, you want a crazy good campaign? Well, here you go. And that's what it sounds like it's going to be. So I'm excited.
Yeah, very excited. I'm definitely going to get my hands on that this week. It's on Game Pass. We'll talk more about Game Pass and as well as Call of Duty in our new segment, in the second segment. But it's a big game, and it's probably Xbox's biggest launch for this year, and probably most years, to be honest, because they have the Call of Duty name and branding for every single year, because they come
100%
out.
right.
I think they've skipped 1 year recently, but almost every year there's a different one that comes out.
Yeah, absolutely. Uno, what about you? What have you been playing this week?
So actually, I've been playing more bite-sized games. To talk about what I did last week, I'm still playing my card games on mobile. I'm still playing Vampire Survivors. They just announced a big Vampire Survivor DLC coming out this week.
Yes.
Out of nowhere, they're just like, hey, here's a Castlevania one, which is kind of crazy because that game is essentially just Castlevania sprites redistributed into like a different type of video game. And so to them to find, they got a Contra brand before this involved, and now to get this, it just shows you like the depth at which how popular this game has really become.
Yeah.
So I've been dabbling more into that. I played hundreds of hours of it before, but now it's on mobile. So I've been playing Vampire Survivors on all my travels right now, as well as my card games. I played more hours of Metaphor. I would love to say I have more to tell you, but like these games are so meaty that 3 extra hours is really just 3 hours of lore. And it's still I wouldn't say setup lore. I've reached that point. I think Act 1 is finished. You know, like the thing happened.
Okay.
The thing happened where I'm like, okay, this is where we go from here on. So I'm very curious to see where it goes. Just visually, it's still incredibly pleasing. It still mechanically feels like a Persona game, which is very fun if you're to turn-based RPGs. But I think it's one of these games that it's going to take me probably 4 months to ever achieve like an ending. And so I probably won't keep talking about Metaphor every week, but in a few months when I finish it, I'll give you my honest opinion on it.
Please.
But right now, I'm very much enjoying it. I've dabbled in more Fortnite. It's been like 4 weeks since I jumped back in. There's the Fortnightmare stuff that's on right now. It's very fun. A lot of new weaponry, like a chainsaw from the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. There's a horde mode that's in right now. And it's the end of the season, so we're just on the cusp of early November when they switch over. So like right now, you'll see like the largest influx of people because everyone's trying to finish their season, including myself. So it's a very good time to jump into Fortnite. But the main stuff that I've been playing is I played 2 bite-sized games. It being Halloween, I wanted to play a horror game. And this new horror game that came out, and I have a larger topic that I want to definitely address on this. But
sure,
there's a little horror game that just came out. I don't want to butcher this name. Mouthwashing, it's called. And first of all, one thing I really want to discuss here is I think what I like about horror games is they're typically short. I feel like their experiences, like, unless you're Resident Evil or Silent Hill, where I feel like your game has enough gusto and enough lore that I can take 20 hours out of a video game. Mm-hmm. Most brand new IPs or brand new indie games, I don't feel have enough gimmicks, enough like weight to the game to be 10 plus hours. So a lot of these like little indie games that have 3 hours and they're just fleshed out with ideas that they only hammer with these ideas for like 15 minutes of each game, I think it's perfect. So I've been playing Mouthwashing. Yeah. I completed it in under 3 hours. It's a very, very interesting, like, you're on a spaceship, and essentially, one day one of the member gets effed up and mangled, but you don't know who did what to whom. And so as you're playing the game, people are slowly going more crazy, weird things happening. And it's kind of like a whodunit, and simultaneously like an Alien video game.
That's cool.
It has a lot of very cool atmosphere stuff, but like what I enjoy the most about it is that this is a little independent project, and they only have so many assets. It's obviously they're not building a 10-hour game, and so they're not going to be spending all of their money on building different organisms and so on. So they reuse a lot of the assets in such interesting ways that you'll pop into like a different. There's not levels, but like a different section of the video game, and you're like, oh, that's the asset I saw from a previous level. But like when you blow it up and you turn it red and you turn it sideways, it looks like a different thing, and then like it becomes like a whole life of its own. And it's almost like I'm starting to realize that this is what I like about video games, because now I'm starting to look at it as like an artistic point. Sure. So like as I'm playing it, I'm starting to realize like, oh, not that this is cost cutting, but like someone was smart enough to be like, oh, if we take these things and we use it for something else, you can get a scare out of it. You can get an emotional, impactful moment. If we just change the camera settings, it'll feel super different. And so Mouthwash is really weird, very weird game. It's about like a crew in space, essentially slowly going crazy, and you play one of those characters. It's well worth your time. If it's like $10, it's on Steam, 2.5 hours. And I played it in one night, and honestly, now that because I have also Fear the Spotlight, which is a Blumhouse game. They just got into like the video game world, so they make all these great horror movies. Now they just released a PS1 style video game that is getting incredible reviews. So that game I'll be playing this week as well. But it made me realize like that's what I want out of a horror game. I'm not much of a guy who likes to. I don't get scared if I watch a movie. I don't get scared if I go to a haunted house. But when I play a video game and I'm in control, something about it irks me, and I can't play a lot of it. And I feel like a bite-sized 3 hours the perfect length. If I could do it in one night for $10, that's an incredible bargain for me.
That is. And Uno, I'm sorry to interrupt you here for a second, but I just wanted to bring this up. First of all, that sounds awesome, and I agree with every single thing that you said. But going off of using like assets or aspects of your game when you're limited to try to create a scare, it just immediately made me think of like the Silent Hill fog.
Yeah,
exactly. In the PlayStation 1. Yeah. They could not render the map. So they're like, shoot, what are we going to do? How are we going to make this eerie? Oh, I know. We'll make the fog. And it's like such an iconic part of Silent Hill that does make the game indeed scary. So I do love when developers find ways, even with limitations, to like add to the fear of the title. So you talking about that just made me think about how cool video games are, dude.
They ended up like creating the entire identity of Silent Hill. Like if it wasn't for that fog, I don't think that game's as interesting, right? Like part of you not seeing what's like 15 steps ahead is part of what makes it terrifying. And like in this remake, you'll get to play it this week. I'm actually going to try to finish it this week too, because it's Halloween. Oh, nice. So I think we're both going to probably talk about it next week. But like they've rendered such incredible fog physics that like it's even more interesting to see it current day, what you can do with like the power of a computer. And now the fog is not to like limit what you're seeing, but literally like to layer what you're seeing in a way that, anyway, all to say, I think it's really fucking cool. Oh, I swear, whatever. I think it's really cool when like video games end up reusing assets or reusing something that's so simple, and it's just like it's a fix, but somehow that becomes like the main crux of video game.
Yes.
Other than that, I haven't played other horror game. I do have Fear the Spotlight set up, and I do have a couple other small horror games that I'm going to play, being Halloween week. But I ended up grabbing out of nowhere this independent game that came out in the last couple weeks called Diceomancer. And what it is I've been playing a lot of these deck building games, and I've been playing a lot of these roguelike games, and it's more of that. But I've mentioned Slay the Spire before, so if you're a listener and you'd like to Slay the Spire, this has a very similar situation. You're deck building. Your deck is about attacks. It's about blocks. It's about creating minions, depending on what character you have. But the thing that's very different about this one, that I think is unique to this game is you are playing with cards, but occasionally you have a card that has a dice on it, and the dice have effects that are like ethereal. So essentially, rather than just play with the cards, if you have a dice, you can roll the dice, and any number that's on the screen, you can re-roll. So for example, if you have 2 lives, I can re-roll and try to get 6 lives. If an enemy has 154 of health, I can re-roll it, and he now has 4 of health. So you can...
Wow.
If you can start synergizing some stuff, like because you get these relics that passively affect your stuff or actively affect your game. So like you could get a passive that says every 15 turns have triple damage, but then you could use your dice to change it to, you know, you're rolling a 1 to 6. Well, okay, every 3 turns I get double damage, and then suddenly, as you're progressing in your run, you're changing your own stats, and you're essentially on God mode and affecting the code of the video game. And it's very interesting mechanic. Like it's something I've never seen before. And it'll literally like freeze the frame. And so it could be both ways too. If you're fighting a boss, and the boss, it's like every round he gets 15 of strength, so he hits harder. Well, you could change it to be like, okay, this is the thing that's messing me up. If I use my dice on this, well, he only gets 3 of strength or 2 of strength or whatever of strength per round. And so you're mitigating that damage for you. So it's very, as someone who likes these deck building games, I'm all the way in on this, and I feel like no one's actually talking about it. It also has a very cute art style. It's like hand-drawn. They're mostly like pigs that I've been fighting, or pigs or like little animals, but very cute, very fun. If you go out of your way and you like those type of games, be it like Slay the Spire, Balatro, but not necessarily, but like Hearthstone, and so on. If you like board games or Dice Dungeon, go try out Diceomancer. I don't think anyone is actively pushing to play it, because it's the other thing about independent games. There are so many that come out that I almost feel like there's always 3 or 4 gems that come out monthly and no one knows about them.
Oh my God, yeah.
So please, if you like this type of video game, this one's a very interesting one, and I've already put in like 6 hours into it, and which is, I'm probably gonna put in another 30. So very, very worth your time if you're into those games. A very interesting mechanic with the dice for sure. But that's it for the video games we've been playing this week, unless you got something mysteriously in your back pocket, Chugs.
No, I do quickly want to say that I'm very excited that Banjo-Tooie got released on Nintendo Switch Online.
Yes!
Very excited about that. I love Banjo-Kazooie. I've not played it yet. But I'm very excited about that. Because that announcement felt like it came out of nowhere. So yes. I will definitely be playing that very soon. As far as, I didn't play it this week, but we'll definitely be playing that soon. But
I saw that announcement, and there was a part of me that's like, ooh, are we going to get to a point where they make a new Banjo game?
Oh, please.
You know, because like,
please, dude.
Now that platformers are back around, I feel like we're not that far away from a new Banjo game.
I agree. 3D platformers are back. Banjo, please come back.
Yes, Rare. Please I don't know what you're actively working on anymore, but please make a Banjo game. That would really make myself, Chugs, and Hangman, who is a big Banjo guy, extremely happy. That's it for the video games we're playing this week, but that is not all. There's been a ton of video game news. We'll talk about it right after this. And we're back. Welcome back to All Elite Arcade. Hey, it's late October. A lot of stuff has happened. We've talked about horror games, and we're going to be talking about more horror games because we actually had what is called the Dread XP's Indie Horror Showcase just came out. A whole hour of new and upcoming horror video games have been unveiled. Be it gameplay trailers, be it announcement trailers, be it date release trailers. We can't talk about every single one. It would be the lengthiest podcast we've ever produced. Yeah. But I do want to shout out a couple of them. If you want to go out of your way, go to YouTube. The Indie Horror Showcase is on there right now. And so there is a bunch of stuff. It's the perfect time for Halloween. But I will leave the big piece last because there is one game that is a remaster, and I feel like we can get more about it. But some of the games that I'm really interested from it, Among Ashes, which is a first-person horror game that looks super interesting because it is a first-person horror game where you are in the game and in first person are playing a computer game where you are first person as well. So within the game, the horror game that you are playing is kind of like that movie Stay Alive, where if you don't play the game, you will die. So it has like in its story within the first person game, there's an extra layer of a video game that might kill you. And that affects the first person of the character playing the video game. So it looks very interesting.
It's very cool concept.
A very cool concept. It's got a lot of these games have the PS1 horror style, which I you know what? That's our generation of stuff, and I think that's that might be what horror games are for the foreseeable future, to be honest.
For real, and I love it so much. Again, all these indie devs who are like making that PS1 style graphics for their horror games are so great because, like you said, first of all, there's something eerie about those graphics. I really mean that. Like, I know we have nostalgia for it, but for some reason, those PS1 graphics just creep me out a little bit more. And again, first-person horror to me is the most effective form of horror. I think it's the scariest as far as immersion and things like that. But yeah, I love that the PS1 style graphics are making a comeback, man. I love it.
And they're like all over this too. Another PS1 game that has, or another game that has the same style of graphics. Blind Exposure is a horror game that essentially you're investigating an abandoned facility in search of like a beast or a monster of some kind. Except the only way you're equipped to travel is you have to take these scans or these photos, and the photos produce what's in that room. So as you get into a room, it seems like a normal room, but then you scan it, it opens up different paths and stuff. And all of that is in PS1 style as well. One thing I'll say about this showcase, there's a lot of interesting horror concepts in this. And I'm actually kind of baffled how this wasn't like a one-trick pony through the whole hour. They really touch all kinds of cool stuff. Other than that, on the PS1 stuff, there is another game called Holston, which I ended up watching the trailer, and it looks incredible. Essentially, it's a first-person PS1 style graphic in first person, layered with 2D, like, think visual novel sprite characters. But then, as you get from your, I guess it goes, because we only see some gameplay of it. When you go house to house, it goes first person as you're driving through forests and stuff. But then you get to the house, and you're now in an isometric top view, kind of like a pulled back from like Fallout 1 and 2 view.
Yep.
And as you go through that, and anytime you trigger your weapon, you go into a first-person view again to shoot people around. So it looks really cool, and aesthetically is super pleasing to look at the eye. And that's Holston. It looks very interesting, coming out later this year.
Resident Evil Gaiden on the Game Boy.
Yes,
like that, where you run around in like a mansion, and then you get into a zombie battle, and then you have that timed first-person shooter event.
Dude, I haven't heard about that game in so long. That's exactly what it feels like. Of course.
Yeah.
Another one that looked very interesting. One is called White Knuckle. This one is actually a first-person speed climbing game. So it's like rock climbing with like. Essentially, you jump on ropes, you jump think about Mirror's Edge, how you would like climb buildings and stuff.
Yes.
Except you see every individual hand, so you're controlling the hands as you move it. And then it has horror elements. Obviously, atmosphere is very horror, but like it shows monsters climbing up behind you. So there's like an extra oomph to everything you're climbing, so it will make it a very stressful environment. To me, sounds way too stressful. I'll be honest.
Sounds so stressful. Yeah. I was going to say, if it was a beautiful atmosphere and you're climbing, I'd be stressed out. Climbing any sort of heights is terrifying. I'm with you. That one sounds incredibly stressful. Maybe I'll test myself.
Yeah, maybe. I'm actually realizing that I think rock climbing might be the most terrifying thing in the world.
It's certainly top 3.
Yeah,
I completely agree.
Yeah, if you ever see the movie I think it's called Free Fall. It's about like people climbing without harnesses. It's terrifying.
What are you
terrifying.
Doing?
Yeah, seriously. The camera shots in that alone, I watched it on a plane and I thought I was gonna die. So other cool stuff. So on the subject, they've done a lot of cool horror stuff. Another one that was called Love Eternal. This one is a 2D platformer. It kind of feels like Celeste, but the mechanic is that you can go and reverse your character. So like essentially you could get onto the roof, you can get onto the floor, but then you can like shift in the middle and kind of like gravity rush it and like try to avoid spikes and stuff. But the thing that looks very interesting is that in between that, they have like these really cool pixel rendered cutscenes that if the trailer is any indication, on top of doing like this really cool Celeste style platforming, you'll get jump scares of these 2D things jumping in as well. And so it melds like visual novel and platformer together, and it looks very, very interesting. That one's called Love Eternal.
And Uno, again, too, I know you had mentioned this a couple of times, but seriously, the thing that sticks out so much from this showcase, like you said, is all these like cool original ideas that people are bringing to the table.
A lot of variety. As far as
these horror games. Yeah, which is great. So cool to see what people are trying.
I've got 3 more to talk about, and 2 of them very, very original. One is a remaster. One is called Dead Letter Department. And what's very cool about this, it's a first-person game, but it's a data entry game. So it's like a job simulation game where you walk around your office, you get a bunch of stacks of documents or drives, you go back to your computer, and you have to physically enter addresses that you read. So it feels like a mononymous. Is that the right word? Probably not. It feels like almost like boring work, like you're doing grunt work, you're repeatedly doing the same thing. But as you're playing, a lot of like weird psychosis and oddity situations start happening. The cracks start beginning to appearing, and like you start losing your mind. So you start seeing it in visual text, you start seeing it around it. They're pitching it as an atmospheric typing horror. So it is, you are physically typing letters, but as like something about the ambiance makes it worse and worse and worse. They haven't showed a lot of their tricks, because I think that's one of those games that is probably going to have a ton of cool little tricks, but you don't want to reveal the bag. But very interesting concept. And I will probably, this seems like the type of video game I'll be into, but I don't know if anyone else will.
Well, and Uno, I do love, because I see this a lot too with indie horror titles, where, for example, there was one where you are like working at a restaurant and you by yourself, and you're doing these monotonous tasks of like, making a hamburger or a hot dog or getting someone a coffee. And then slowly over time, things start getting crazy. So again, I do love the horror aspect of you're there typing letters, and then over time, more and more weird stuff starts happening. So
I like a slow burn in a video game, especially a horror game. Another big one, this one that was actually teased back 8 months ago, but they talked about it again on this showcase. Dark Web Streamer, which is essentially you're a Twitch streamer or whatever, like the equivalent of a 90s streamer would be. But it's like occult themed. So like you manage your stream, you do rituals on your stream, you make friends through the internet, you navigate through web pages, and all of it is will be different every time you play, because it is procedurally generated as you play. So like the events may not happen the next time you play it. You can get completely different paths. And essentially it's like, as you're navigating this 90s inspired web, a lot of weird occult stuff happens. A lot of like weird virus stuff happens to your computer. It looks very interesting, and aesthetically, it's got a very cool sprite look to it. This is one I'm definitely gonna be playing. It's called Dark Web Streamer. It should be out sometime later this year. And then the big final one. This was not final because it played very early on, but I think this is one that we could talk about. In 2002, there was a third-person survival horror game called The Thing, and based on the 1982 film, but also based on the sequel that is also exactly like the original film. It is being remastered by Night Dive Studios. They're the same team that did the remastered version of System Shock that got a
great news,
because honestly, that's gotten a ton of incredible reviews. I played about an hour and a half of it at Gamescom when I was there a few years ago, and it honestly, as someone who has played a little bit of a System Shock, immense upgrade, very good work. So they're doing a remaster of The Thing that includes, upscaling for 4K resolution, anti-alias, 144 frames per second, which is
very good.
That's an immense jump up for a game that's 20 years old. New pixel lighting. They also they've redone all 20 levels. They added a new, or at least they improved the fear interface.
This looks so cool.
It looks really cool. So like as you're playing the game, this interface influences the team's like state. So kind of like Eternal. Oh, what was that called? Eternal Darkness.
Eternal Darkness.
Yes. So as you get crazier, and so your team gets crazier. So that's part of the dynamic. And then they added, of course, like shadows, depths of field, a lot of stuff that it would be a quality of life stuff for current stuff. That is coming soon to Steam and GOG. And I watched a video. It's not like you can't make RE2 and then RE2 remake comparisons because that is a completely a different thing. They made a new game.
Great point.
But it is a huge jump up in 20 years to see this video game from 2002 getting a game 22 years later and like really implementing all of the updates from current gen. And I've never played this game, and I love the thing. It might be one of my favorite movies, if not my favorite movie of all time.
Classic.
It's incredible. If you're wondering like one of the best horror movies of all time, go check that out right now. I think we suggested it last week as well. This looks really fun, and I will probably be giving this a try now that it's modernized to current day. So if you want to watch any of these trailers, you can. It is all available online on YouTube. The name of the showcase is the Dread XP Indie Horror Showcase 2024. Do check it out.
Yeah, definitely go check that out.
All right. 2 last pieces of news. One of them specifically for you. Elden Ring, Shadow of the Earth Tree. It's back in the news. We haven't talked about Elden Ring in a few weeks. A streamer managed to complete the game with 1 HP, 1 stamina, and 1 FP. It took over 55 hours and 1,900 deaths. Streamer Ainrun successfully completed this DLC. And just so you understand, no death runs are one thing. I feel like a lot of people know how to do it.
Yep. Still very challenging.
Yeah, insanely. But 1 stamina runs. Imagine this. If you run, that's your stamina. If you roll, that's your stamina. If you attack, that's your stamina. So there is no continuous attacking. There is no continuous rolling. You essentially have to be picture perfect, and you have to maneuver in like the slowest way out of people's way. Like if there's a sliver of a spot where you don't get attacked, you have to always be in that to even get 1 strike in. And so the fact that this has been done, I don't know if this might be the first streamer to ever do it. But it's 55 hours to complete, including 20 hours battling the last Radon fight alone.
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course. That fight was one of the most difficult bosses in Soulsborne or video game history for that matter. But Udo, you're 100% right. Like I've seen people before do some pretty amazing challenges with Elden Ring, whether it's the base game or the DLC, where they'll do no death runs or like no hit runs even, are again absolutely unbelievable. But like you said, to only be able to do 1 action and then not having any FP, so it's not like he could cheese any of the bosses with magic or spirit ashes or anything like that. He had to play freaking perfect. So this is so impressive. So impressive.
Yeah, it's insane that they were capable of doing this. And obviously, like, this is a top end streamer for Elden Ring. They've done the no death runs before. To take 55 hours to do this DLC is insane. And because we haven't talked about it in a while, I actually never beat the Radon fight. Couldn't do it.
Oh, no way.
I never ended up finishing the DLC. I actually shelved it and thought, like, at the end of the year, I'll come back to this. But I guarantee if I come back to it in the next month, I'll have lost all of the muscle memory. And so I'll probably end up replaying it. But a bucket list item for me, for sure. I still got to finish it.
Yes. And you will achieve that.
I will achieve.
Yes. It's going to be a celebration on this podcast.
That's right. Positive reinforcement.
Defeat Radon. Yes.
Ugh. Yes. And then our final story, we talked about it a little earlier, but Black Ops 6 just came out last Friday. We talked a little bit about the reviews. We're getting 9s and almost 10s across the board for the campaign. Reviews for the multiplayer, we're waiting on this weekend. So we have not read yet the multiplayer evaluation. But the super interesting thing about Call of Duty Black Ops 6 is that it is a day 1 game on Game Pass. And Microsoft And as far and like game business in evaluators or journalists have been claiming that they believe this game will boost Game Pass subscribers from 2.5 million to 4 million subscribers. Essentially, doing this is actually going to hurt the sales of the video game, but it will see 1 million plus subscribers go to Xbox service, and the analysts believe that it will actually end up being more beneficial for Microsoft because over time they will stick around. They will play more games, especially in the next year. Xbox has a better lineup than they had this year.
Exactly.
So just recently, they actually took away the deal where you could buy the Game Pass for $1 for a month. They removed that, knowing that Call of Duty was coming out because Microsoft's predicting this is going to be their big mover for the Game Pass. A survey at IGN revealed that a large portion of their audience intended to play Black Ops 6. The ones that already had Game Pass, 70% of the people that already had it, based on their survey, were going to play it, and nearly 8% of people that answered said they were going to get Game Pass just for this game. After also removing this, they're essentially trading the full sale of a video game for these Game Pass things in hopes that it will garner interest for Xbox games in the future. So what I would like to discuss is, do you think this is a good idea? Because, they made this purchase of Activision just recently, and if you're making this purchase, Call of Duty is the biggest fish of them all. That's the game every single year you're guaranteed tons of sales. Is it weird to cannibalize probably your top-selling game so that you can get subscribers, or do you think that is actually an incredibly smart model for the future of Xbox?
It's such an interesting discussion to have because I could see arguments for both sides. I could see some people going like, Call of Duty is one of, if not the best-selling video games every year. What are you thinking, Microsoft? But I think their strategy, I do think it's a good one. I think it's really, really great long-term thinking based on the two things. First of all, more and more Game Pass subscribers is good for Microsoft, obviously. So, and I do think that Call of Duty is going to encourage a lot of new Game Pass subscribers for sure. But the point that you mentioned that I think they were thinking with the whole idea of people getting Game Pass to then stay within the Xbox ecosystem and play more games that are available, I could see that happening very well also. So I think it is wild to think about, but I do think long-term wise, I think Microsoft is making a very interesting and the right decision. I think getting more people, like we had said, to stick within the Xbox ecosystem, what a great way to get a bunch of people to get Game Pass than having Call of Duty Black Ops 6 day one on Game Pass. So it will be interesting. I don't know what you think, Uno, but it will be interesting to see.
Yeah, I can't wait to see like a few months from now the analytics on how many people actually did make the subscription and stick around, because it's weird because they're probably throwing away millions and millions of dollars on physical sales and digital sales of this video game, but in return, they're potentially getting, let's say they get 1.5 million people subscribing now. By 6 months from now, I guarantee you more than 50% is still around, because that's kind of like how the model works, right? Most people don't, like, I have so many subscription services that at this point I don't use, but I feel like I need to keep because at some point I might use it again. And I feel like that's what's going to happen to Xbox. And it will also then start garnering interest for all of their next stuff, right? By having this install base, they know that the next Xbox thing, it starts with a little bit of advance. Now suddenly 4 million people have the opportunity to play this rather than 2 million. And that will garner more interest into those games, which will garner more interest into Game Pass. So I think it's a huge gamble, but it's also a smart gamble, because this is a game where they guarantee there's a user base that will flock over. Whereas if you were going to do this with, like, let's say the new Fable, I think a lot of people want to play Fable, but I don't know if a lot of people are willing to jump into that. Whereas Call of Duty is like appointment gaming. Everyone that plays Call of Duty every single year, they're like, all right, me and my friends play Call of Duty. It's like a common game that everyone's going to play. And so the common person who may not have a Game Pass, who will only get this one time a year, might end up getting Game Pass, because Game Pass is $10, The video game is like $80. So I think I think it's a huge gamble. I think it will pay off, but I'm really curious to see in a couple months from now when we had the numbers in front of us.
Me too. And you're right, going off that gamble and then thinking, like, I'm trying to imagine, again, I understand completely where Microsoft is coming from in regards to this gamble, because they've been very open about the fact that they feel, and I love Xbox, but they very much feel like they are in third place.
Yes.
Compared to Sony and Nintendo. So they feel like they want to take some new different risks. And with this lineup that Xbox has coming out the rest of 2024 and into 2025, it is some blockbuster video games. Yeah. So again, if a bunch of people get Game Pass, stick around for a little bit and then try all these new Xbox titles, this could be great to increase the Xbox's player base. It really, really could. But like you said, it's a gamble. So we'll see. We'll see. I hope it pays off for them.
On the stuff that you said, I actually think Microsoft is number 3 right now, but on a hardware side, you know, like console sale wise and like physical assets wise, I think they're in third place. Nintendo has their own IPs. It's always going to sell. You know, they've got a handheld, which is different from PlayStation and Xbox. PlayStation has done incredible with the PS5. Like it's been selling like gangbusters for years now. But one thing neither of them, I think, have is they're not future-proof in the way that Microsoft is. Like, Microsoft now has an ecosystem that when they launch the next one, they're like, whatever next console, you also get 160 games you can just jump onto. And I feel, and like a user base that is going to be active. So I think, like, while right now they're definitely in third place, they're much better for the next cycle of video games and consoles than I think the other two are.
Oh my God, for sure. And then can you imagine if Xbox released a handheld? Can you imagine that too with Game Pass on it? Oh God.
You know what?
That'd be so great.
That has to be the gamble, right?
Has to be.
Yeah, I think that's the future of what, because like if I could just have Game Pass on, because you can have it on your phone. Your phone has Game Pass on it. You could theoretically cloud stream to your console and play off your phones if you want. I don't think we're that far away from them doing a handheld console with enough firepower within it to just run Game Pass, and I'm really excited for that.
Me too.
That is it for the week of news here at late October. But guess what? It's time. It's that time. It's the community mailbag, our favorite segment, and it's coming out right after this. And we're back. It's time for the community mailbag. That's right. You sent us your questions. We answer them. tbs.com/arcade mailbag. If you are a U.S. citizen, you can send us your questions. And please do. We say it every single time, but this is our favorite segment. You ask some of the most interesting stuff, and we get to reminisce about video games, which honestly, that's what this is all about. It's about going back in the past, feeling a bit of nostalgia. And then on top of that, I just love delving into these like niche discussions. So very happy with it. Please keep sending your questions. tbs.com/arcade mailbag. Chugs, what's our first question look like?
Yes. So first question. Thank you very much. This is from Jeffrey. Jeffrey, thank you. Jeffrey says, "Hey guys, loving the podcast." Thank you. With Halloween right around the corner, I wanted to ask you, what was the first time you've ever been scared in a video game? That's such a good question. That's so good.
I feel like I'm going to have cop-out answers because I feel like we talked about it, but I never really played horror games on my own. I would go to my friend's house. He had Resident Evil 2, and from watching it, I was like, I can't do this. I just can't do it. Going around a corner, opening doors and stuff, I just can't do it. It's terrifying. So those are my first experiences thinking of horror game. I could remember when I was in Control, the first game to really freak me out, and I was an adult by this time, was PT. That was the first time where I was like, oh, horror games are not for me. They give me too much anxiety. They're too terrifying. And on a similar subject, when it was like horror movies, I was completely fine as a kid until Blair Witch Project somehow blurred the lines between what was real and not, and my brain could not comprehend it was a movie. And so even though there's not necessarily something terrifying, it felt so real to watch that from there on, I was like, oh, found footage stuff is not for me. It just makes me so stressed. What about you, Chugs? What's the first time you remember getting scared from a video game?
Yeah, a little side note, but you're right. Blair Witch Project is terrifying.
Yes.
It was so terrifying as a kid. But I do have a very distinct memory in regards to the first time being really scared playing a video game. And funny enough, Uno, it is from Resident Evil 2.
Oh, yeah.
So me and my brother were younger, and we were in our room playing our PlayStation 1, playing Resident Evil 2. We were pretty scared, but we were like powering through it. We're like, we're going to be tough. We're going to keep playing through this game. And there's one point where you go into this room or the STARS office and the music changes. And we saw this trail of blood and the music got really intense. And I'm slowly walking towards, and I go into the room, and there's Marvin, who had moved from the front hall area, but now into the STARS office. And the music was so foreboding that it told me this wasn't going to be good. And I couldn't walk forward. I said, oh, I can't do it. My brother Brent, I said, you play it. And then he went to do it and moved a little bit, and then he couldn't do it. We had to call our mom into the room to be into the room when we encountered Marvin for the first time. We were so scared, dude. So terrified. So I remember that was the first time ever that me and my younger brother were genuinely terrified. And now looking back, we all loved Marvin in Resident Evil 2. But oh my God, at the time as a kid, with the combo of the music, oh my God. The RE2 soundtrack, by the way, is so good. It's so good. But yeah, that's the one for me. But Jeffrey, thank you very much for the question. I appreciate it.
It's crazy to see these things, 20, 30 years removed, because like those experiences traumatize us as kids. But like nowadays we're like searching for them. We're like, oh, I hope this game is terrifying. I hope they do the Resident Evil atmosphere really well. Like now I can see it with like a bigger picture mindset. Yep. And I love that video games are capable of making us feel like these intense feat of emotions.
Yeah, for real.
Next question is by Devon. Hey, Uno and Chugs, what do you guys consider qualities of an epic and memorable video game villain? Do you think retro games had stronger villains or current gen? I lean towards the later when you consider villains like Kefka from Final Fantasy VI, Dr. Robotnik, Bowser, M. Bison, Shao Kahn. All of them seem timeless compared to the ones in current generation games. I think this is a very interesting question because I think if there are strong villains nowadays, they will not leave an impression like old ones. And I think the main part is that now you're like when we were playing video games 20, 30, 40 years ago, because you know some of these date back to 30 plus years ago. There wasn't a lot of competition, Bowser, Mario was the main guy on all video game platforms. Everyone played it, so Bowser becomes like a prominent bad guy. But Bowser's not necessarily like an incredible bad guy when you think about it. Like that's sure. Like run of the mill situation. You just takes the princess and then you go through levels. I think Kefka is an incredible bad guy.
Yes.
I think a big part of that is that you understand that the character's ramifications on the world are like, okay, this is like the whole world is about to be destroyed because of this character. Like the stakes are extremely high. And I think a big part of what makes some of these villains incredible is that early on, much like, let's say, Sephiroth, Sephiroth from Final Fantasy VII is always going to be my example, is that you get a taste of how powerful they are early on.
Yes.
And you realize how far away from what, like, your character is nothing compared to them. And so that when they go to the crux where they become villains, you then feel like it's an insurmountable situation. And I think that's what makes a good villain. Obviously, they also have to do an incredibly awful thing, but also feel justified. I think like
that's a big one.
Like Sephiroth feels justified. Kefka Kefka's kind of just like straightforward villain. I'm going to destroy the whole world thing. But like Handsome Jack's justified. I know you're going to be talking about him for sure. I feel like a justified villain is a memorable one to me. As for current villains, I can't even think of a single one. So I think current day video games, the issue is that we're in competition, but we're in competition with everything. Like media is now one big thing. You know, we're competing with TV shows, wrestling, movies, like television villain, like real life human people are now like villainized in a way that I just don't think if we have a strong villain, you'll forget about it in the next month because we've cycled on to the next thing. And I think a lot of reasons why we think like villains from the past are so incredible is that they just didn't have as many people to compete with.
Yeah. No, I literally, Uno, agree with every single thing that you said, because I do think this question is so interesting because there are so many different iconic villains from so many different eras and generations of video games and how much they've evolved and changed and almost become, now they're more like TV show or movie villains in a lot of ways with this backstory and the dialogue and things like that. But obviously having a memorable, charismatic villain in a game is so important. And with video games, it encompasses everything. Things like the music that plays when the character's on the screen, things like the interaction with the hero in the story as well. But the two biggest things for me, as far as making an iconic, memorable villain, is number one, the dialogue is so important. If it's voice acted, I think obviously the voice actor or actress who's doing an incredible job really, really adds to that character. But not just that, but the interesting aspect of what they're saying, I think is really, really fascinating to really find out what this character is all about. But going off of what you had mentioned with the justification, I also love hearing the backstories of these villains and knowing that at one point they were good, something horrible happened, and that made them this person. Again, you'd mentioned it briefly, but Handsome Jack is the prime example of that character. Is when you play Borderlands, the pre-sequel, you see that Handsome Jack really did mean well, and he was a good guy, and he got screwed over so bad that he absolutely lost his mind. And I think it's interesting because it's something that, even though, of course, this is a very extreme, exaggerated situation, I think a lot of people can understand what it's like to have good intentions, something bad happens, and then you react negatively to it. That's like human emotion in a lot of ways. Obviously, video games turn that dial up times 10, but Handsome Jack is one that I think of. Or I also think of Dutch from Red Dead Redemption 2.
Yes.
Right? Like, he's so charming in the beginning, and it seems like he really seems like he would do anything for Arthur. But then as more and more of the story unfolds, you see truly deep down what this man's character is like. So again, I know I've mentioned this before, but Handsome Jack is my favorite video game villain of all time. But I do think villains within video games are just as important as the heroes in the video games too. So I love the idea and discussion of villains in video games because there's so many different ways that you can go about it. Like Bowser is much different than Sephiroth.
Yes.
And Sephiroth is much different than Dutch from Red Dead Redemption 2. But they're all interesting villains. So it's just, it's so cool. I've
always
cool.
been a villain fan before everything else, which might explain a lot of like who I am as a pro wrestler as well. But like,
yeah,
I don't think there's an interest. Your game can't be that interesting unless you have a interesting antagonist, you know?
Yes.
A protagonist is only as strong as his villains. If we're talking comic books, one of my favorite comic books of all time is Batman. And I think why Batman resonates with people more than, let's say, Superman is that Batman is not the strongest person. He has faults, and his villains are so strong and so interesting that it makes Batman more interesting. The second you have villains that aren't as interesting, or like, let's say the main comparison is Superman. Superman is so strong that the villains have to be ungodly and almost unrealistic for it to even feel like there's a chance of them winning. And I feel like that's the same thing in video games. Like, they have to morally, they have to have a good reasoning. They have to seem powerful, but also simultaneously, to make the good guy proper, they have to just have they just have to have substance to them. Unlike a lot of like Bowser, I think Bowser's an incredibly cool villain, but to some extent, he is very one note. You know, it's just he wants this princess and nothing else. Great question. Seriously, thank you so much, Devin.
Very, very good question. And last question today is from Barkus. Barkus, thank you very much. Hey, Chugs and Uno, what are the weirdest games you've ever played? For me, nothing will ever compare to Seaman on the Sega Dreamcast, an older PC isometric RPG called Sanitarium, and most recently, Cruelty Squad. Big shout out to Uno for putting this on my radar.
Yeah.
Marcus, thank you very much. Ooh, weirdest games we've ever played. Interesting, huh?
So I'm a big proponent of the weird video game. I love And it's hot. It's odd because weird can be all kinds of things, and it doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad game.
Nope, not at all.
I just think like contextually, if it's an odd situation or if it has an odd mechanic or subverts like the genres, it can be very weird. So for example, like if you haven't played this game, Stanley Parable is a very weird game where you think it's one thing, but it's a narrative driven game where no matter what you do, they planned for it. So it's hard to explain, but you just walk through an office space, and if you follow the directions, it plays one way. But if you don't follow the directions, the narrator knows and has dialogue for that too. So it's like contextually giving you more story, more dialogue, more narration based on whatever you do. So you could think like, oh, if I go through this door, that's where the ending is. I'm going to turn back, but then it accounts for that. Other games that do that as well, Slay of the Princess that just had the pristine cut. It's a short, bite-sized visual novel game, but it's the type of game that no matter what you do, it takes account for it. It comes back and brings it back to you. Like, hey, you did this, you were a bad person. You did this, you're a bad person. Or you thought like you could subvert the video game by going back one room and not facing the villain. Well, we realized that, and now we're going to do stuff with it. So I think those are very cool, weird games. But the one that I wanted to talk about, I just walked by it, or here it is. Oh yeah, Who's Leela? It's a point and click game where your character doesn't have the motor functions to change his face, and it's in 2D. And what you do is you have to react. It's a quasi horror game. You have to react to people's dialogue, and you have to physically move parts of the face to make smiles or make frowns or be puzzled and stuff.
Oh wow.
And it's super mechanically weird, visually weird as well. It's just a weird game, even to an extent that I'm not even sure if it's good, but it is so weird and interesting. It's a game that I've played just recently, and that is my suggestion to you. Who's Leela is my suggestion for a weird game to play.
Oh, nice. So, again, the cool thing about weird games is, again, weird doesn't necessarily mean bad, just interesting, like a different concept. One that immediately popped into my brain, which, God, I played years ago on PC. This is another point and click game as well, but Leisure Suit Larry was a very interesting, very weird game where, again, I guess all I'll say is you're trying to go on dates. It's a very interesting game, but I remember that was really out there. Probably the first like weird or different game I had ever played. But as far as some more modern stuff, again, thinking about a game like Goat Simulator or Squirrel with a Gun, is just, these are weird, out there, wild, and funky games. But again, super fun to play. I had a blast with all of them. But yeah, there are definitely some weird games out there. But Uno, based on your list, I definitely got to check out a few more.
Yeah, and just to list a few other ones, Return of the Obra Dinn, incredible game, super weird. You're just going through pirate ships. You're like on a time frame of a specific murder, and you have to like decipher what happens. The Talos Principles, huge, weird in the sense that like they're ethereal weird, where you realize like what you're playing has a grander picture, it's all connected. There's so much weird stuff out there. That's the beauty of video games. Like having people make their own video games means that they can add their own spins to things, and it's the world of video games needs these weird games, because like the second you veer from the path, I get very interested. I always want to see new mechanics. I want to see new ideas. And the weird games are the way to do it. If you're on YouTube, actually, youtube.com/AEW Games, go in the comments down below and suggest some weird games. Evil Uno loves to play a weird game. Give me a little descriptor. Give me a name. Let me know where I can play it. I'm always looking for new stuff. I would be eternally grateful to you if you did so. And thank you so much for that question as well.
Yes, thank you. And again, we have said this before, going off the weird, creative games. Again, one of the other coolest things about video games is, again, you can tell any story you want. You can do anything you want. Anything that the human mind can come up with can be put into a video game. So it's just so awesome. Video games are the best.
They're the best. The effing best, dude. Where can we find you, Chugs? You're on Twitch this week?
I am on Twitch this week. So once again, I've returned to the 5-game cycle. Actually, this week I'll be playing Paper Mario: The Thousand Year Door, Dark Souls 2: Scholar of the First Sin, Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown, and of course, Silent Hill 2 Remake. And that will be over on twitch.tv/thechugs. Hopefully you can join me this week.
I'm finally getting settled and potentially going to be streaming. I know I say it all the time. Twitch.tv/eviluno. If it's not this week, it will be in the next few weeks. I'm going to do it. I also have been playing so much Diceomancer that I feel like I need to at least stream some of it, because I feel like I am wasting so many opportunities to at least talk to people rather than just playing these freaking card games in silence. So twitch.tv/eviluno. I've said it before, but now I'm going to make a promise. I'm going to stream this week. Come back and watch it. I appreciate you very much. Hey, find us on all podcasting platforms. Every Monday, All Elite Arcade comes out. Make sure you hit that follow, that subscription button. Also, we're at youtube.com/AEW Games if you want to see the video format, see our beautiful faces, see occasional clips of the games we're playing, as well as get in those comments, because that's where I'm reading them every single week. We need your suggestions. We really appreciate it, and we love you for sending them in. Thank you, as always, for another great week of All Elite Arcade. We will be back next Monday. Bye-bye.